competition between Cole and York was out of this world. Solskjaer!
Oh, wouldn't you know it? The substitute is the one who gets the hat-trick.
And when he needed a finish, wonderful, wonderful, fit to win any football match.
Roy Keane with a captain's goal for Manchester United. Game on! Manchester United, champions of Europe, champions of England, winners of the FA Cup, everything their hearts desired.
Oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Football, bloody hell.
This is the true story of the 1999 UEFA Champions League final, as told by Manchester United.
È riuscito a superare il due avversari e gol! Gol di Alen Baksic quando siamo al 33esimo minuto.
Juventus qualified.
Yeah, Juventus qualified.
A lifeline for Manchester United has been thrown out by Ryan Giggs. Full speed ahead, Barcelona!
I hope. If it's not this year, it'll be soon. But this could be our year. If we get a little bit of luck and we stay reasonably free of injuries, why? We can give it a good shot.
With a performance in Turin that Sir Alex Ferguson labelled as his Manchester United's finest yet, the club had shaken a number of monkeys from their back. It was their first European Cup final since 1968, and they had defeated the strongest team of their era in Juventus to do so. It all started at home to ЛКС Łódź in qualifying, and a big shout out must go to UEFA Suits, who allowed non-champions to appear in a tournament called the Champions League for only the second time in the 1998-99 season. And maybe it's because of that backdoor cheekiness that United are handed comfortably the most ludicrous group of all time. We've got Barcelona coached by Louis van Gaal, which features a trident of the world's best in Luis Figo, Patrick Kluivert and Rivaldo. We've got Bayern Munich coached by Ottmar Hitzfeld, recent winners of the UEFA Cup, captained by the legendary Lothar Matthäus, and Brøndby, who also exist. It's a bizarre group phase in which United score 20 goals but only win 2 games. Their tussles with Barcelona enthrall the continent and both are drawn. And the tactical battles with Bayern are also drawn and go right down to the wire, a common theme between these two this season, I'm sure you're all aware. And Brøndby, well, like I said, they also exist, and United slapped 11 past them. It is those wins in what is quite an unforgiving group phase format that qualify the English club through as one of the 2 best placed second place teams and into a quarter-final. Karma for having the temerity to play in a competition called the Champions League without being champions of your country, and that continued into the knockout phase when Inter Milan were pulled out of the hat. You know Inter Milan, spearheaded by the best player in the world at the time in Ronaldo. Even if he was a footnote both in the media circus beforehand and in the matches throughout, despite the big news of his return from injury, that is because the devil himself was included, and it meant a certain reunion.
And a red card for David Beckham. What an awful time to receive a red card. Question marks have been raised over his temperament on the big occasion.
It's Dwight York again from David Beckham's cross again. It's a combination to which Inter Milan have had no answer, and Manchester United are in charge of this quarter-final. Oh, the header is from Simeone, would you believe? Now the referee's disallowed it. Well, that'll wipe the smile off his face.
And like we said, karma. So via their compatriots Juventus, Manchester United were booked into a European Cup final on what would have been Sir Matt Busby's 90th birthday. A Champions League final on its own great season, supplemented by what had been another successful season back home, it made for an historic one. Defeats in the league before Christmas to teams like Sheffield Wednesday and Middlesbrough might have just allowed the deluge of Arsenal's silverware to continue into 99. That loss to Borough in December of 98, however, would be United's last for nearly a year. The season was ignited by a highly charged win over Liverpool in the 4th round of the FA Cup. From then on, United were imperious, whether it was a scrappy late 1-0 win at Charlton or a record-breaking 8-1 demolition at Nottingham Forest, another double looked on. Chelsea, the third wheel in the title race alongside United and Arsenal, were downed in the quarter-final of the Cup before Leeds tripped up Arsenal in the league, and the last ever FA Cup semi-final replay were all but confirmation that a treble charge was on.
Beckham! What a goal! Well, it was going to take something to make a breakthrough here. Goal for Arsenal! Flag up, no goal. Flags up again. It's Arsenal's turn to be crestfallen. He's off. It's Roy Keane. They've lost their lead. They survived going behind, but now will they survive the dismissal of their captain?
Stunned Arsenal fans, joyous United fans, and if this is the last semi-final replay goal we ever see, well, it'll rank with some of the greatest ever scored.
Hold on, stop the footage. We've forgotten something incredibly crucial, something which changed the entire fabric of English football forever.
Stoppage time, down goes Barber. David Ellery gives Arsenal the penalty. Bergkamp and Schmeichel. And Schmeichel has saved it. What a hero for Manchester United.
And it is that penalty save from Peter Schmeichel that allows the 1999 UEFA Champions League final held at the Camp Nou, Barcelona, to be such an important game in the history of the sport we call football. Manchester United weren't without their problems going into the final, however. Roy Keane, a fitting successor as the club's captain marvel from Brian Robson, had played in every single minute of United's 12 Champions League games that season, and 2 yellow cards in those 1,080 minutes of football ruled him out of the biggest football match of his life. Paul Scholes, a man who had netted crucial goals in Munich and Milan, as well as at home to Barcelona, would join him on the sidelines. United's central midfield had been completely wiped out. As such, Nicky Butt was ruled out of the FA Cup final against Newcastle United because he had become the club's most important player. David Beckham, fielding centrally as a third domestic double in 6 years, was completed over Newcastle United in one of the most serene matches of the club's season. Ferguson's selection headache wasn't just consigned to midfield, as Jaap Stam couldn't be risked for the Wembley date with Newcastle either, holding an Achilles problem. He'd be back for Barcelona, but absolutely could not be risked beforehand. The manager had also promised Jesper Blomqvist a start in the Champions League final as a result of those suspensions. The Swede, who had tormented United 5 years prior and helped eliminate them from the Champions League for IFK Gothenburg, could be said to have been the only signing from the prior summer not to have worked. After all, Stam had quickly installed himself as the club's rock at the back, and Dwight Yorke was the club's top scorer that season. Where Blomqvist would be played was the big mystery, only clouded even further by David Beckham's brilliant performance at centre mid against Newcastle. Ultimately, Beckham would continue in that role, with Giggs to his right and Blomqvist on the left in a midfield that had never been used before. In truth, it was an 11 that had never been used before, and wouldn't ever again. Armed with dreams and trepidation, United flew out on Concorde fitted in grey Versace suits, picked out by who else other than David Beckham. Within minutes of the final in Barcelona, their worst fears were realised.
It's Basler. Oh, deflected and in! First blood to Bayern Munich!
More than one commentary team in the Camp Nou that night had been deceived by the impeccable unsung work of Marcus Babbel in disrupting the United wall. Schmeichel wanted a 4-man wall to defend the early free kick after Karsten Janker had been bowled over by Ronnie Johnson. Babbel inserted himself onto the end, dragging Nicky Butt with him, which only unsighted the Great Dane, who was making his final Manchester United appearance. Babbel spun, taking Butt with him as Basler arched a low free kick beyond what was ostensibly a blind goalkeeper and into the bottom corner. An unremarkable looking goal with a remarkable tactical scheme behind it. United were 1 down, but then again, they had made a habit of coming from behind that season. But this increasingly felt different. The midfield was all wrong, David Beckham too deep as he attempted to quarterback the entire game. For a similar but more effective and desperate performance, see his shift against Greece at Old Trafford in 2001. Blomqvist, as ever, was shot with nerves down the left, whilst Giggs wasn't getting much joy cutting in from the right, as the old familiar overlapping Gary Neville wasn't able to get into the game. With a lack of crosses or service, the prolific partnership of Andy Cole and Dwight Yorke lacked an energy and bite up top. In short, it was exactly how it appeared, these players' first ever European Cup finals. As a club, Bayern Munich had waited a similarly long time to win a match like this. only 8 fewer years than United, but in Lothar Matthäus the German had the club's one remaining survivor from both the 1987 European Cup final and the captain of West Germany's Italia 90 winning side. Perhaps it was this experience, or perhaps it was tired legs that made Bayern so superior. After all, since the pair had last met in the first week of December 98, United had played 12 more fixtures. Despite both clubs going for trebles and Bayern playing every available fixture, United played 7 more matches over the course of the 1998-99 season. Bayern were comfortable in their 1-goal lead. One of the best goalkeepers on the planet, Oliver Kahn, had yet to be tested, and even their youngest and most inexperienced in Sami Kuffour was putting in a masterful performance at the heart of defence. United players trudged into the dressing room for half-time, and Alex Ferguson had just one thing to say to his players as he looked them in the whites of their eyes for the last time during the break. It was a speech 13 years in the making, 13 years that Alex Ferguson had been at the club, yes, but this was a sentiment, a feeling borrowed from one of his former players, Steve Archibald. Archibald was part of the Barcelona team who reached the 1986 European Cup final and lost it to Steaua Bucharest. His feeling of desolation in departing that game without becoming a European champion was transplanted into the Manchester United dressing room at half-time. Ferguson said, "You will be 6 feet away from the European Cup, but you won't be able to touch it. I want you to think about that fact, that you'll have been so close to it, and for many of you, it will be the closest you ever get, and you will hate that thought for the rest of your lives. So just make sure you don't lose. Don't you dare come back in here without giving your all." And he was right. Only 2 of his starting 11 would get this close again. Yapstam would falter in spectacular circumstances 6 years later in Istanbul for Milan, whilst Ryan Giggs would be present for 3 more finals with United. Ferguson was worried his team talk would put too much pressure on his players pre-game, which is why they heard it at half-time. And although it is a famous example of a manager earning his coin with a rousing sermon, United's continued poor performance maybe confirmed his worst fears. One of the few things going for United was that sand remained in the hourglass, that and the ability to draw on his substitutes. Ferguson's first choice was Teddy Sheringham, who, by his own admission, was enduring the worst season of his career. He hadn't filled the void left behind by the early retirement of Eric Cantona in the prior season, and had scored just 3 goals all campaign before he netted in the FA Cup final 3 days prior. United needed 2 in 26 minutes when he finally entered the fray. He joined his BFF Andy Cole up front, and introduced for Blomqvist, United moved to a diamond midfield with Dwight Yorke as the 10 but as the 6, with Beckham and Giggs in their more familiar roles on the right and left respectively. It was the move of a gambler rolling the dice in the highest stakes game imaginable. United played their best football whilst gambling, whilst at full tilt. With Neville now overlapping on the right, Dennis Irwin and Giggs more comfortable together on the left, and a trident of potent forwards, United would get chances, except they knew that they would also concede plenty themselves. A game previously frozen by fear had been thawed into life.
Oh, delicious chip, hits the post!
Life, but not a happy existence for United just yet. Bayern continued to create more chances than their foes, and this comfort manifested itself in the withdrawal of captain Lothar Matthäus with 10 minutes to play. It was in all likelihood his last Champions League final, 12 years after he was last on this stage. Bayern were confident that it wouldn't end up like 1987.
Malger com espaço, vai marcar, cruzamento, Joari. E aí está o apito final do árbitro. Porto é campeão da Europa. Vitória por 2-1 sobre o Bayern de Munique.
Almost simultaneously, United looked to their own bench. They needed goals, and in May 1999, there was only one man they needed to turn to. It was time for the super sub to end all super subs.
Solskjaer, who almost had to sacrifice himself wide up the right-hand side at Wembley on Saturday. Now, has he got a goal up his sleeve? Teddy Sheringham onside, Neville's cross. Oh, the header from Solskjaer, his first touch!
United were getting more of a foothold, sure, but it wasn't a barrage that it usually was. Plus, Bayern were still going closest to ending the match as a contest.
Was there, Scholes there with the header, Yankee with the overhead, hits the crossbar, twice the woodwork has saved Manchester United.
George Best vacated his seat. He didn't have any desire to watch Bayern Munich celebrating, so typically he went to seek out a local watering hole. The sand almost fully escaping from the hourglass now, not just from the match but from the night. The press boxes were a nervous scramble to file their match reports and analysis for the first editions of the following morning's newspapers. 10:30 p.m. local time, everything had to be laid out in black and white by the time the sun rose back home in Britain. The articles told the tale of a magical season for Manchester United, but as was so often the story in the 90s, the Champions League was just a step too far. The treble too, a step too far for this Manchester United team. With the board for stoppage time being prepared, it is now UEFA President Lennart Johansson's job to ready himself for the trophy presentation. Being such an enormous stadium, he vacates his seat, passing Bobby Charlton with an apology before finding a lift or a staircase to reach pitch side. 90:03 reads the clock and Gary Neville sprints from right back to left wing to take a long throw-in which spills out to a central David Beckham, who feeds his mate with the ball back again, but a weak cross can only be diverted for a corner. 90:23, David Beckham retrieves the ball near the tight corner of the pitch, looks up and sees the green-shirted Peter Schmeichel ambling into the opposition box. 60 yards up the near touchline, Alex Ferguson angrily asks his assistant, Steve McLaren, what is he doing, or words to that effect, and instantly Beckham knows which type of corner he needs to deliver. After years of being bollocked by Schmeichel for crosses during training, a light, lofted ball is needed to create confusion. 90:35, it does. Schmeichel nearly gets to it, attempts at clearances are either scuffed or missed, all are futile before two more scuffs of the football change Manchester United forever.
Can Manchester United score? They always score.
The big goal is coming up.
Peter Schmeichel is forward.
Can he score another in Europe? He's got one in Europe already.
In towards Schmeichel. It's come for Troy York. Clear, deep for the shot. Sheringham! Name on the trophy.
Nicky Butt sprints back to get the blood pumping in the knowledge that 30 more minutes of intense football await him. Teddy Sheringham and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer trot back, simply happy to experience such a grand occasion for an extra half an hour. Extra time beckons and McLaren turns to Ferguson on the touchline to ask whether they should switch back to the 4-4-2. This game isn't finished, is his response. Lennart Johansson has probably got into the stadium's lift, unaware that there's been a goal. Crestfallen journalists sit tearing their hair out, having filed off their analysis, which no longer makes any sense. And United win the ball back instantly from kickoff. They instantly go again. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wins another corner from the once domineering Kuffour, and a red roar goes up from behind the goal. 92:05. There is no Schmeichel this time. Assessing the situation in an instant, Beckham knows to change his corner, and he instinctively knows the man who will end up on the ball.
Is this their moment? Beckham into Sheringham and Solskjaer has won it!
And it is only now when Lennart Johansson emerges onto the side of the pitch and, supposedly, exclaims, "The winners are crying and the losers are dancing." In front of him, pure devastation. Kuffour pounds the turf in distress, others simply strewn on the floor. Kahn props himself up against the goalpost, and referee Pierluigi Collina stands over them all, urging them to continue the game. And finally, Lothar Matthäus stapled to the subs bench in utter bewilderment.
And how must Lothar Matthäus be thinking? Well, with the greatest respect, who cares?
Those from a German persuasion couldn't sum it up, didn't want to sum it up. Europe was left in awe. Manchester United had become the champions of Europe with 2 goals in stoppage time. Fairy tale stuff on its own, but then underscored with the fact that it had completed a treble.
Oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Football, bloody hell.
When George Best was entwined in celebration under the Wembley spotlight with his manager Matt Busby, barely 22 years of age, there was the feeling that a story had been completed. From the ashes of Munich to the Wembley culmination inside of just 10 years, George Best was simply the right man who was born too late. This Manchester United, though, was in its peak. Yes, in Europe they had grown together and learned together before winning together across much of the 90s, but they were all in their peak. It should have been the beginning of a continental dynasty, the like of which Manchester United hadn't been able to achieve before or since. the like of which Real Madrid, Ajax, Bayern Munich, or dare I say, Liverpool had achieved. Maybe it was the sheer energy and toll it took to hold off Arsenal and each and every one of Europe's best in that 9-month campaign. Maybe it was the completion of their own story with no other peaks to scale by the fact of winning a treble. Maybe it was football had to change and United had to change with it. Long gone were the days of an English club being successful with a 4-4-2 in Europe. Alex Ferguson knew that in the 1998-99 season as well. This is why you have Ronnie Johnson being found deployed as a defensive midfielder in crucial European knockout games. This is why two profiles of forward were used in Cole and Sheringham, the hold-up players, to provide for the more prolific York and Solskjaer. In 2000 it was Real Madrid, the indomitable Raul goals, the wizardry of Fernando Redondo's back heel. In 2001 it was Bayern Munich, the self-proclaimed end of an era quarter-final whimper as Roy Keane announced that the team had to change. And they tried. Juan Sebastian Veron was strong-armed into a 5-man midfield as treble heroes Cole and York were shunted out for the one-track forward mind of Ruud van Nistelrooy. With the final team believed to have been built, Ferguson signposted his retirement for the summer of 2002. It was the romantic in him, it's almost certain, that saw the staging of the 2002 Champions League final at Hampden Park in Glasgow and saw the perfect riding off into the sunset scenario. It was not only Ferguson's hometown but where his obsession for the European Cup was born, where he witnessed the Real Madrid of Puskás and Di Stefano tear Eintracht Frankfurt apart 7-3 in 1960. But it was a season in which United floundered, only recovered by Ferguson's sensational U-turn, a season only thwarted by a slender away goals defeat against Bayer Leverkusen in the semi-final. United would need to evolve a bit more, they needed to suffer a bit longer. Ferguson watched Arsenal become invincible at home, he watched Chelsea become rich and then special before creating his last great Manchester United team.